Welcome all you Zoomies to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight it's soft tackle wet flies. And before we get too far down the line, let's go to just an awful commercial message. We sell books. I hate to tell you this, but we do. And that's part of how we finance all this stuff. We'll be tying from, you know what? We're not going to tie from any of the books at all tonight. We're just tying because somebody requested soft tackle. And here we are. I've got some things to play with because we are going to play with some feathers tonight over and above just tying flies. I'm going to probably show 3 or 4 different tips. This is a whiting saddle, a hen saddle. This is a full partridge. And here's some just feathers to play with. We'll be tying with one of those hooks. We'll need a little bit of calf tail. I've even got an extra vise out here. We'll be putting that to use here in just a moment. And we got different colored thread. Start out with the orange. I may as well put that over at the vise. And we're going to need some copper wire. I'll get that over there as well. And it's time for the, if you hadn't figured it out by now, it's static guard time. Yes, we're going to use this stuff. I just hate having it, especially when I start to work with the calf hair. That stuff it'll stick to your hair stacker from static electricity as quick as anything will. Anyway, let's move over to the vice scratch. Okay. We'll be tying with a size 10 in this particular case, so you can see what we're doing, but anywhere from an 18 to an 8. I'll be using orange thread. I will be using a fine copper wire for the rib. Hackle collar, I'm going to use partridge. And I'll just pick ones that'll actually fit the hook and fold it per normal. Abdomen is going to be orange double magic in a noodle. Thorax will be orange double magic La Fontaine style. And then we'll finish off with the thread head. Now I need to find a hackle first. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. This is my partridge. Let me check this feather right here and see if the fibers will be just about, by the time I wrap them and everything, they'll get just about back, just a little bit past the hook point, maybe a little bit too far for the average, but I like my soft tackles just a little bit long. So I'm going to fold that feather and let me get this out of the way. And you already know what my system looks like here, so you're just going to see a feather kind of stick it in from the side. You already know how that works. Well, I better move it over so you can at least see me fold the hackle there a bit. There we go. And I'll get my tweezers, stroke all these fibers back. One of the things that I really like about the partridge is it folds like crazy. I mean, some feathers just fight the process tooth and nail, but not the partridge. They get with the program right off the bat. Yeah, now I got to move back to the center, get my hook back here. Okay. Now, you're going to see me probably tie flies a little bit different than some of you do. I'm going to start by tying in my feather. I'll get a little bit of a thread base up in the front here. So this is one of the few flies you'll see me start very close to the hook eye. Okay, well, let's take my partridge. And I'll just tie that in place, just like I did the others. One turn over, come back behind, and start laying that in place. And we'll trim off the waste end here. All right. Now let's get the copper wire. And invariably somebody asks me where I get my fine copper wire. You can't get it anywhere. It's back in the days when I was went to work for the phone company, they had phones that actually had ringers in them before they started tweeting and playing songs and all this other stuff. And when the phone company decided to get out of the ringer business and into the tweeter business, they literally threw away thousands of ringers from phones and replaced them with these little tweeter thingies. One of my jobs as a technician at that time was to go out and replace all of those, and I did. I kept all of those coils out of those ringers because I thought they were just gorgeous. Let me start by putting some wax on the thread. There we go. And this time I will put the lid on. This afternoon I did it again. Gretchen saved me last week, but I wasn't paying any attention to what I should have been doing, and I dropped it in the waste bin. Sure did. What a mess. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I want you to notice that how that's all fuzzy all along there. Well, the way we touch dub is we touch it to the thread and then twist the noodle, if you will. The way LaFontaine did it is he just wraps it. I said, wow. I said, Gary, it have to fall out. Well, you know what? It doesn't, because every time you go around the hook, okay, I better twist up a little bit more of that so that I can get, because I only want the thorax area to be to have the twisted noodle. I want the rest of it to be the LaFontaine method of touch dubbing. Now we're coming up to the stuff that's just touched on there. And as every time your thread makes a turn, it's twisting and it's grabbing those little fibers. Yeah, stroke them back just a little bit. Anyway, what I want you to notice is that we have it fairly well compressed here at the back, and it's real fuzzy up here around the thorax area. That really makes for a nice light catcher in the water, if you will. Now let me go ahead and wrap some rib forward through this. When I get up to the LaFontaine style, I'll just wiggle a little bit. And I'll tie off my rib in front of the hackle. Trim off the waist, and now it's time to wrap our hackle. All right, using the Rocky method. Darn that folded guide. I know somebody else probably thought of it, but Rocky's the one that showed it to me, so I'm giving him kudos. Notice how that lays in there so nice? I'm just stunned. Okay, just like John Kreff tells us to do, we want to divide in between. I kind of wiggle it around. You can divide those fibers there as you tie off that feather. Now we'll just pull that off. And for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, dog-legging the hackle means that we bend it back and then wrap a thread head jam knot up against it. So we're actually anchoring the feather from this direction, and then we anchor it from that direction. Makes it pretty durable. And we can make a smooth, delicate head without any junk showing up next to the hook eye. All right, I'll pull this up and I'll just jam my scissors in there to cut it. And that sets us up for a good whip finish. And for those of you that don't know what a good whip finish is, let me see if I can get my camera set here to show you. Okay, a good whip finish is when the thread starts at the back of the head and each subsequent turn advances forward towards the eye. Many people do what I call a bad whip. I know I did it for 40 years. They would start at the eye and wrap each subsequent turn further back on the hook. I'll show you both. I'll start with a good one. Starting at the back, next turn slightly closer to the eye, closer yet. There's turn 5 right there. Stop. Now I want you to see where the thread disappears under those 5 turns. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to wrap forward like most people do. They end up with the thread hanging at the hook eye. And they say, okay, well, I'm going to do my whip finish. I'll do 5 turns. And they wrap first one close to the eye, next one a little bit further away as they climb their way up towards the back of the head. Sounds cool, doesn't it? All right, now I want you to see what happens here. You see where that thread lays right across the top? I wonder where the weak spot is. I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. It hasn't had a real name until we started doing these Zoom classes. It was always just referred to as the Trude. Well, the Trude has been in my box, and it's been in a whole lot of different color configurations and tying styles, and I mean, you name it, it's been there. And we're going to tie it, and for years I tied it in the traditional manner, like you saw me tie the partridge, this partridge fly just a few minutes ago. You know, wrapping the hackle and everything, except I did tie my hackle in at first thing instead of waiting until the last. Well, I'm going to start now by wrapping a few turns of thread, Gesundheit, Gretchen. A few turns of thread right here at the front. And let's see, I'll just get some grizzly feathers out here. Let's see how long the fibers are on that. On my wet flies, I like the hackle fibers to be really long, but that's too long. Let's see what this is like. Here's some pheasant feathers. Yeah, that's a little bit better. I think I'll do that. Now, I'm going to get over here and get this hen cape and just get a longer feather out of it. We'll just dig through here until we find one that I'll need the extra length to wrap it, but I don't need the extra fiber length. I think this is looking pretty good. Yeah, that'll be better. It'll be reached just about to the end of the hook, and that's what I'm wanting. Okay, let me strip my fibers back and lay my feather in place here. And we'll just wrap that back. And we'll come back forward to the front here. I need to back up just the one turn. There we go. Now we're just going to grab that feather with the hackle pliers and just, I'm not bending these fibers back. All I'm doing right now is kind of fuzzing them up a little bit so I can wrap them around the hook. All right, they're wrapped around the hook. And I wrap backwards. Did you notice that? I started right up at the hook eye, and then I wrap back to meet my thread. I didn't wrap forward. That's kind of a different way of doing it. And I'm just kind of tying that off right now. Let me set that hackle pliers aside. And now we'll pull those wrapped hackles forward and grab a hold of the feather that's remaining, and I'm not going to cut that off. Instead, I am going to start wrapping back towards the back of the hook until I reach the hook point. My thread's hanging right there at the hook point. And what I'm going to do now is grab the feather. Well, first off, I'm going to grab my bobbin. So I've got tension on the bobbin, on the thread. You don't see it, it's off camera, but I'm holding it with my left hand. I take my right hand and I snap that feather off, and I've got my tail. Let me just finish wrapping to the back of the hook shank. All right. All right, we're going to need some wire. And the body is going to be peacock. We'll just set that wire aside for the moment. Stick it in our material keeper. And I'm going to take a pause here. And anybody have questions at this stage? I'm going to grab a quick drink of tea. Well, I'm not seeing anything. Anything over there, Gretch? No. I guess not. Okay, well, then back to the vise we go. All right, I'll just get my peacock curl here. Now remember, most people tie their body materials on the back of the hook and wrap them forward. Well, I do too on an awful lot. But I'm going to tie these on at the front. And I'll just trim that off there. I broke one, so we'll see if I have enough to get the job done or not. We'll find out here real quick. Now what I'm going to do is bring that in line with my thread. I want you to see that I'm holding the thread in my fingers, and the bobbin isn't just flopping around. I'm kind of holding it with the palm of my hand and my little finger so that I can start wrapping the body at the front, working my way back. Now imagine with me what's going on here. You can already see it starting to happen. I'm holding on to that, and it's twisting the hurl around the thread as I wrap towards the back. And we're right there at the back of the hook. Now I have to untwist the excess twists, but that thread has already got that hackle fairly well anchored in place. But we're going to make it even stronger yet, because now we're going to crisscross wrap forward, anchoring that even further. And let me stop right there. I'll trim this off. And now we'll get back to this crisscross wrapping and making things strong and everything in just a minute. But first I want to take and separate. I don't like the way that one's laying, so I'll get rid of it. Notice how I'm pushing that down. I need a place for my wing, and I also need a place to come across with. What's that? Yeah, it's right there. I'll get to that in a minute. I'll come across with the thread and lay it across, and what it does is holds the hackle on the offside down and out of the way, so when I put my wing on, it will not be a problem. Now I'm going to counter wrap the wire. More counter wraps in there. There's so many counter wraps going on here that we just don't know. And what it's going to do is I counter wrap and come forward one more turn. It lays across and holds the other side of the hackle. All right. Now I'll just trim off that. And now we're to the point of, see, we have a nice division on top. Keep I'm hanging up my second pair of glasses on my camera. I don't want to do that. It's not a good idea. So now it's time for the wing. Well, let's talk about calf tail for a minute. Calf tail is a I've got a calf tail here, just with only the fibers near the top or the tail or the tip end of the tail, if you will, still on it. The rest of it has been trimmed out. In fact, from about this 2/3 point on down to the base is really great for dry flies. But when you get up to this point and start working your way up to the tip, the fibers get a little bit longer, a little bit more translucent, and they're really, really great for wet fly type flies that are going to be wet because their translucency is very different from the ones in the towards the base of the tail. Now let me pull the fibers out. One of the things about these longer fibers towards the tip is they don't stack as well as the shorter, different consistency fibers do down towards the base. So I hand stack them to get started. And it seems like when you break them away from their buddies and then lay them back in there, they'll stack in a stacker a lot better. And now what I'm going to do is just cut that off, but I'm going to reach off camera and do that so I don't have hair all over my camera. Now I'll back the fibers in there in the hair stacker. And that evened them up pretty good. Set the stacker out of the way. I want the wing to come just about to the end of the bend of the hook, or part of the way into the tail, whichever way you want to look at it. All right, now I'll just go ahead and, oh dear, I'm going to have a mess here that I'm going to have to fix. Well, I always do this for you guys on purpose. There's a little bit of white showing there, and I don't want my customers to know that I did a bad job on that head, so I'll take my felt tip marker. There, no, that's gone. You can't see it anymore. And I'll go ahead and put a whip finish on that fly. Notice how the wing sets. I like the wing to set with a reasonably low profile. Why? It's because that's the way I tied it a whole bunch of years ago, and that thing has been catching so many fish for me. I never could see a reason to mess with anything that wasn't broken. And there it is, the Trude. You can tie your Trude and have it, use it anywhere you would want, any color combinations. This just happens to be one I like, but I have tan and gray and black and red and all those in my box, and they're all called the Trude.